Hello and welcome to the Talking City podcast, the Manchester City podcast from the Manchester Evening News. My name is Joe Bray. A lot of stuff hopefully to talk about today, even though we've not got the football. We've still got plenty of transfer talk to get our teeth stuck into. Joining me is Simon Bajkowski. Si, how are you doing?
Yes, very well, very well. We're just pros at this now, aren't we? Just
we have had one false start here now, haven't we? So.
No, all fine. No, nobody will ever notice.
No, just ourselves and our stuttering Monday morning podcast routine that we've got going now. Let's get stuck in. We've got transfers to talk about. We left it last week with Ilkay Gundogan gone to Barcelona. We were expecting Mateo Kovacic to follow him in the door for City. We've got that. It was a fairly impressive start for Kovacic, if you can take that from his interviews. Let's just get stuck into Kovacic. It's a 25 million deal plus 5 million in add-ons through the door now. It's a good deal for City, that, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think it's kind of... it's one of them. I don't think it's a very exciting deal. We're kind of never as excited when we've seen players before, and kind of Kovacic is a known entity, and isn't a massive fee, but is, a very good signing. I think, as you sort of said last week about what he brings, it's just so much experience, and kind of notable when he did sign that City Sporting Director Cheeky Begiristan said this is the guy who can play 6 and 8. So obviously he's kind of earmarked for, some minutes in holding, some minutes further forward. I mean, fundamentally what it confirms is that he's another versatile player for Gvardiol's squad that, means that it's not two players in one, but it's one player that can play maybe 1.5 roles, which is always valued by a manager who doesn't like working with a massive squad. So I think how important Kovacic is will kind of depend if they bring another midfielder in. But yeah, very good signing.
Well, we were saying that, weren't we? Where is he going to play? Because he's not going to be a direct replacement for Ilkay Gundogan, but he is a player who can play in that sort of holding midfield role on his own. He can play further forward. I think he said himself he wants to play, or his favourite position is the left side of midfield, which sort of is closer to an 8 than a 6, but it's another position kind of altogether. So I think that versatile nature will help City with that midfield, especially without Gundogan. But I suppose that's kind of what Gundogan did. I know we're saying he isn't a replacement for Gundogan who's just gone, but Gundogan could play that holding role if Rodri wasn't there. He could play a false 9. He would play left or right depending on who was next to him. I don't want to keep saying he isn't a replacement for Gundogan, but he is going to fill that role, isn't he?
Yeah. I think when we say he's not kind of a replacement for Gundogan, we fundamentally mean he's not kind of like the big signing that you would expect to replace the treble-winning captain, but there are a lot of characteristics. I think kind of the jury's out on whether he will bring the attacking prowess that Gundogan did, and certainly Gundogan in this last season kind of formed a very good relationship with Haaland for second balls and connections that I don't know if Kovacic will, but he's said all the right things, and he's 29, so he's not young at all, even though it feels young to some of us. But I think he's the oldest signing they've made since like Pep's first season. But at the same time, he says he thinks he has a lot to learn, and City will, always relish getting their hands on a player and giving them something different. So if all goes well, then we will be seeing more from a player that we seem to have seen a lot of at kind of Real Madrid and then Chelsea. So then kind of the comparisons will either be more real or less real.
I think there was one of his videos, he was looking at goals that had been scored, sort of iconic goals from City, and he noted that Gundogan was, I think, one of the most improved players, in his words, under Gvardiol, and he also said, I need to score more goals like Gundogan did, because Gundogan didn't arrive necessarily as a goal scoring midfielder, but he kind of left as one, especially towards the end of his career. So if he's looking to improve, and he's got, is it a 4-year contract? So I do think it ticks a lot of boxes, and we will talk about the transfers going around the Premier League, but I think the 25 million is very good value for a player like that. What it did mean is that City went forward and said, we're not going to pay 105 million for Declan Rice, whether it's connected or not, who knows. But we left it again last week, where City were open to it. There was talk of a bid. I can't remember the exact timeline, whether they'd put a bid in or not, but ultimately City put a bid in, Arsenal raised a bid to higher than City wanted to, and City walked away, and Declan Rice will almost certainly become an Arsenal player. What happened there? Is that a good decision on City's part, or should they have pushed the boat out a little bit more to sign a player of Rice's quality?
I don't think they needed Rice to the extent that they paid £105 million for him, and I don't think, I think the club recognised that to the point where sort of, I feel like, we did talk about City's interest in him last week, but I would like to think that anyone who listened to the podcast kind of got across that there was some hesitation, and then wasn't too surprised when City didn't pay 105 million. There's been like a lot of wild theories and speculation around the deal, and whether you believe that City pulled out because they didn't want to spend 105 million, or you believe that Rice turned them down and so that's why they didn't want to spend 105 million. Fundamentally, they won't be spending it, and so he looks like a good signing for Arsenal, but he looks like a kind of a better signing for Arsenal than he would have been for City, and that is helped by the fact that they have got Kovacic, because although he is no replacement, he kind of is some kind of replacement, and if you're talking about Rice, who's been kind of excellent as a holding midfielder and has the potential to push further forward, well, you've just signed a guy for not a massive amount, but not an insignificant amount, who will be looking to play games on top of kind of the squad that's already there, and so I think fundamentally, I've said fundamentally twice now, haven't I? That's a very important answer. City were looking at a summer where they could have lost Gundogan, Bernardo and Phillips, lost, sold, whatever, and kind of at the minute Gundogan's gone, but there aren't kind of offers pouring in for Bernardo Silva. Phillips has made very, very clear that he wants to stay. So, if they were getting rid of all three, then maybe you bring in multiple midfielders, but sort of for that price, I'm not sure Rice was worth it for me. I don't know. Did you think he was?
It is a tricky one. I don't want to stand there and say, oh yeah, they should have never been interested, now that he's obviously going to Arsenal, but I do think he is one of the only two players that would have improved that City midfield considerably, the other being Jude Bellingham, and obviously he's gone to Real Madrid. I'm looking at that City midfield, and Gundogan's gone, Bernardo's going to go at some point. He's not going to stay longer than his contract, you would imagine, just given the fact that he's wanted to leave for 3 years in a row. Kevin De Bruyne isn't getting any younger, like you say. Calvin Phillips is still up in the air whether he's going to be a success. I think that midfield does need a bit of a transformation in the next few years, whether that means John Stones or Phil Foden coming in, but I think they still need a bit of time. So I do think that a new midfielder or two needs to come in, but if you're not going to get Bellingham or Rice, I don't think there's anyone else really on the market that is worth anywhere near 100 million. So I think it makes sense for them to sign someone like Kovacic, who is a very secure signing. He's experienced. They know exactly what they'll get from him. He'll just keep things ticking over until a better midfielder and a better option becomes available in a couple of years' time. So I can see the thinking from City in that respect. I don't think Rice was worth getting dragged into a bidding war for, mainly because they've got all the numbers that they have at the moment. If he was available next year or year after, I think they would have maybe pushed the boat out a bit more, but he's not, and they've got the players that they have, so it's completely hypothetical. No, I do think City have made the right call on that, and he will probably make Arsenal stronger. He will probably bring Arsenal a bit closer to City, but other teams have signed good players in the past, and City have won 5 Premier Leagues out of 6, is it now, or 6 out of 7? I'm losing count these days. So no, I don't think I'm on the same page as you. Basically, I think it's a clever decision to draw the line at whatever their last bid was, and yeah, it will be interesting to see how Rice goes, because he's clearly a very good player, and Arsenal are a very good team, and he's the type of player who will take them to another level, I think. We also heard this week from Ferran Soriano, and we don't often hear from the CEO, but he said something along the same lines, and he said, if we don't like a deal, we walk away and we don't panic, and that all sort of rolls into the same thing. City didn't like the Rice deal, and they walked away, and they're building a nice little team now of players they've walked away from and let someone else pay what they feel is over the odds, and City haven't often been left to regret those decisions, have they?
No, and again, whether you believe it was Pep Guardiola or Mikel Arteta or the man on the moon who made City bid for him, Arsenal have paid 15 million more than they would have liked, or I can't remember what their opening bid was. So kind of City being involved in it did have an impact on Arsenal, even if they would have paid it anyway. They were kind of hurried up into making that bid on the back of City's 90 million bid. So yeah, that's it. I think City have never been bothered about good players going elsewhere, and there's no denying that Gvardiol likes Declan Rice very much, but shock horror manager who loves midfielders, including Declan Rice, and I think there are a lot of midfielders that are still of interest to City in this transfer window, but it will take something significant for them to move for one of them, because they have to tick a lot of boxes and be the right kind of conditions for a deal, and that was kind of what Soriano was getting at, that they just don't make hasty decisions and they don't make reactive decisions. And he had this thing where he says we don't make decisions on a Monday, because you can be really upset after losing at the weekend, but you've got to give it time to balance out and let your emotions go away from it. And City are very, very cold in the transfer market, really. They set these valuations and they don't really move from them, even if it upsets a lot of people online, shall we say. And they've been vindicated on most occasions, probably.
And with that, we will cut to a break, and we will come back and discuss potential new incomings and some very interesting quotes from Germany overnight. Hello there, welcome back to the Talking City podcast. We've delved into City's midfield additions and the players that they won't sign or might sign. Now let's go into defence, and overnight we heard from RB Leipzig, and it was some quite interesting quotes about defender Josko Gvardiol. It was the Leipzig sporting director Max Eberl who has confirmed, it seems, that Gvardiol wants to sign for City. He said, Gvardiol and his agents gave us their desire to move to City. We are in talks with City, yes, for 100 million euros plus bonuses. He will end up in Pep's strong hands. The value of the deal would make Gvardiol the most expensive defender in history, but it might take a few more days. Now, with quotes as strong as that, you've got a lot of City fans excited that a new defender for a lot of money will be coming. We've just been speaking about how City don't spend a lot of money and don't appear on that sort of list of most expensive transfers, but if you believe the Leipzig sporting director, then maybe they will in future. Si, what can you tell us about Josko Gvardiol?
Well, what are we here for other than to take away excitement from fans? Yeah, interesting comments on the record from a sporting director. I think there's a bit of confusion as to what he actually said and what's been translated and things like that, which is always fantastic when you're getting things from Germany. And yeah, I kind of think it confirmed what a lot of people have been saying, that Man City want Gvardiol and the player is open to a move. It didn't necessarily move the transfer on at all, I don't think. City are, in contact over the fee, and I don't think there has been a bid yet, but in the sense that, they're in talks over what a good fee would be, or an acceptable fee would be. I think I'm not sure City will want to pay as much as that, but I would be surprised if they end up paying significantly less. So, I fully expect City to sign Gvardiol for close to that amount of money. I expect it to be kind of a record for a defender. But I don't think it will I don't think he'll be seen holding the shirt tomorrow, put it that way.
Is this a case of, we've heard a lot of what sporting directors may or may not get up to with other clubs. Is this a case of Leipzig maybe doing a bit of a play in the transfer market, trying to force City's hand in some way or another? Because it doesn't seem like it's the way that City tend to like to do business. We've seen them deal with Napoli in the past, and they're very public, and it's not been what City kind of like doing. And similar with Bayern Munich, they like to go behind the scenes and quietly and get things done, don't they? So is this a move on Leipzig's part, do you think?
Well, I think if a deal had been done, then there would have been no need to sort of come out and say anything. But it's kind of a reflection of where Leipzig are with the sales they've already made, and kind of, announcing a sale to Liverpool that was confirmed yesterday. The obvious question was would they be up for selling another of their star players in the same window? And you get confirmation at least that yes they are, but it will take a lot of money. And this guy's 22, I think, and already huge experience in the Champions League and the World Cup on top of his league. So I don't think there was any disputing that it would take probably a world record fee for a defender to buy him. But there's just confirmation from RB Leipzig that yes, this is the strong position that we're in, and this is what we will be expecting. So a friendly shot across City in their ongoing negotiations.
If we fast forward a bit and jump a few, put a few things that are there that aren't there at the moment, and say yes, he's definitely going to sign. Where would he fit in that City defence? He's another central defender. There are a lot of central defenders at the moment. Aymeric Laporte, for example, could barely get a game in last season because there was so many good informed players ahead of him. Is this a hint that City will continue with that 4 centre-back approach? Does it mean that Laporte's going? It feels like he's a very good player and he's worth buying, but also City are well stocked in his position. So would he move without guarantees of playing time, for example? It's surely you can't have 6 centre-backs and only have 2 spaces for them.
No, I think it's a sort of recognition that the 4 centre-backs will continue to be a large part of things at City. They're not really in the market for full-backs, and Kyle Walker is their only real senior full-back, unless Cancelo comes back from the abyss, which nobody's really expecting him to. So yeah, he comes into a very competitive field of centre-backs. I think he can play left-back. He can obviously play left centre-back in a 3 or the main centre-back. And it's one of those things where, you know, it is kind of extreme competition for places. Like, yeah, it's a formidable kind of backline to walk into and expect games, but then also it's asking a lot for Ake, Akanji, Stones, Diaz, and Laporte if he stays, which kind of there's no guarantee that he does, to be available every game and in the same form that they were kind of for the last half of the season. Because also, kind of remember, Ruben Diaz wasn't great for the first half of the season, and you know, massively made up for it in the last few months. But let's not get carried away that these players are going to turn out 10 out of 10 performances all season long and stay free from injury. So if your strategy is all is for centre backs, then you need cover, and yeah, it's a lot of money to spend on one, and we'll probably go into the top 10 of signings. But if you're gonna focus your team's strength on the defence, then it makes sense to get the player that you really want.
No, I think you've summed up the situation fairly well, and I wonder what it means for someone like, say, John Stones, who we saw in the last few games of the season, basically being a midfielder. And do we think that he will be more of a midfielder than a defender in the next season coming up? And if you have that sort of base of centre backs who can play across the back four, then you have the ability to allow someone like Stones to move forward. But we also saw, you know, Ake and Akanji doing that inverted role. And I mean, this time last year there was no talk of another centre back, was there? And you know, Akanji, the deal happens very late in the window, and we're saying, did they need another one? And it turns out, they needed someone as good as Akanji, and also they did benefit from having that extra defender in the ranks, and it allowed City to be as versatile at the back as they were that season. So I think it's one of them. There are reasons to say, do they need that they don't need another centre back, but I think we're at the point where we've got to trust Guardiola and Bajkowski and say they probably know what they're doing and have a plan, and he will clearly fit into that. And you would also say that if they sign Gvardiol, who, as you say, is very young, he's got a lot ahead of him, and that could be someone who takes City's defence forward. And I mean, they are fairly young, the defenders, but in a couple of years you'll have 2 or 3 over 30, and then you need someone else coming through, and Gvardiol is one of them. So it might be, as I was saying before about midfielders, there's no one available now. He is available now, so if he is a player that you want in the next 5 or 6 years, then you've got to go out and get him when he's there and when he's semi-affordable, because he seems like a player who, the more he plays, the older he gets, the more expensive he'll get. So you can see the logic, as well as the sort of the question marks over just how many defenders City have at the moment. You touched on it, but the fullback situation, can City go into a new season with just Kyle Walker, if Kyle Walker stays at all? Do they need a bit?
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, I think I looked and City have spent like 220 million on defenders under Guardiola, and that'll obviously go up to like over 300 if and when Gvardiol joins, which is a lot, and it's, you know, adding a centre back to loads of good centre backs. But if you look at it across the whole defence, if Laporte leaves, and there's a very real chance that Laporte leaves because, you know, he wants more game time, and he's been told if he gets an offer he can go. If Laporte leaves, you've got Stones, Diaz, Ake, Akanji, Walker, presuming he stays despite interest from Bayern, and Rico Lewis. So that's 6 players to fill 4 positions. So Gvardiol joining would mean 7 players, including, you know, an 18-year-old, to fill 4 positions. So it's still not loads of strength in depth. It's kind of, I can imagine that if and when Gvardiol joins, there'll be loads of stuff about City stockpiling defenders. But if your whole tactic is, 4 centre backs per game, then you do really need more than 4 centre backs in your squad if you're going to make a success of it. I think, Guardiola has done so many kind of things to how we see the game, and it's kind of hard to talk of not going into a season with full backs when kind of Ake can do that role, and others, like, they are playing as full backs at times. They're just not kind of conventionally full backs as we know them. So yeah, I mean, you would expect Walker, if he stays, to play a good number of games, but also you would kind of think the centre-back strategy will see Stones stepping forward and maybe others stepping forward. Akanji did it a few times, and just carrying on as they have been, because it was pretty successful, and it will also be interesting to see how teams kind of adapt and try and
it's also the tactic that got City to the Champions League final and winning it, which they haven't done before. I found it interesting. We talked a little bit about this last week and how it's just City are getting narrower, and I sort of had a look back over the transfer dealings under Guardiola, and was it his first summer or his second summer where he went out and spent sort of 200 million on fullbacks that were definite up and down fullbacks, staying wide, stretching the play, and just over time through Guardiola's tactics, or the fact that just some of those fullbacks just haven't worked at City for a lot of reasons, City have just gotten narrower and narrower, and we've seen João Cancelo came in and they started inverting, so suddenly they're playing with 3 at the back, and then this season they're sometimes just playing with a 2 at the back with the both fullbacks inverting in, or John Stones pushing ahead, and at times in the Champions League final there was just Ruben Dias back on his own, which feels unthinkable, but it just feels like City are getting narrower. It was a few years ago Guardiola really wanted width and traditional sort of Premier League style fullbacks that we've come to know, and now he's not given up on it but realised they don't need it. They have enough players to do that and are versatile enough, and the dealings that we are sort of seeing this summer and may or may not come also show that City are probably going to get even narrower next season, and like you say, continue where they left off. Do you think that is by design by Guardiola, or just by circumstance that he just hasn't been able to find that left back, or he hasn't found a proper right back to rival Kyle Walker, or one of many things?
Yeah, I think one of the things when fans have been wanting a left back or a full back is there haven't been that many about, really, that could come in and do the job. And City really struggled last summer, and then obviously wouldn't pay up for Cucurella, and that seemed like a decision that could bite them. But Cucurella kind of got lost in the chaos that was Chelsea, and Sergio Gomez didn't really work out for City as a kind of stopgap, but he's still there, and can play some games when needed. I think kind of when they did have those fullbacks, and fullbacks were so integral to the team, you saw kind of the attackers above them more in, and kind of Sane and Sterling, 2 guys coming in off the onto the stronger foot inside into the middle of the pitch, whereas Grealish and kind of Bernardo Silva especially would stretch the touchline, and Foden if he played, and really stretch it out wide. So then you have these players coming inside. So I think you still have had the width from City. It's just kind of been further up the pitch. And Guardiola's kind of said, well, if he can't get it with overlapping fullbacks, then we'll just move the players who are further up a bit wider and have them come in. So that has been like the adjustment from City to make sure that they can still cover the pitch, but also they are kind of defensively very solid, because you also get the guys at the back have to kind of stretch across the line for, you know, your Bukayo Sakas or Salas or players that are going to really, really test them. They do have to be across that. So it is kind of how City have evolved. And, you know, if you'd said to me in 2017 or 2021 that Gvardiol was going to be playing without fullbacks, I'd have thought it utterly crazy. But it says something for what he's been able to do with centre-backs.
I was reminded of the very first game of the season at West Ham, where City played Cancelo on the left and Walker on the right, and both of them came inside to make a sort of midfield three next to Rodri. And I think David Moyes walked in the press conference and said, how can we defend that? Because we've never seen them do that before. We never thought that they'd do that. And I suppose that was the start of sort of an evolution this season, where you do have fullbacks, even when you have two recognised fullbacks. You know, you've got both of them coming inside and you're not using them at all. You mentioned one name there, Sergio Gomez. We'll give a little shout out to him. He's turning into an attacking winger, goal scorer, provider at the under-21 Euros as a left winger. I mean, that is his natural position. Did we see that coming? 2 goals, 2 assists, Spain in the semi-finals. Does it mean anything for City? Because he's not going to play at left wing, is he? Surely it's just good that he's getting games and getting on the score sheet, but can City use that at all, that they've got a left back playing in a different position for his country and doing well?
I think it's of use to them that he's looking good on the left wing. I think, you know, in certain games there might be a time to play him there. He seemed to come on further forward a lot more in kind of the final few games when he was getting game time. So, you know, it is an option. City kind of have to decide if they value him enough for what he brings either at left back or left wing to keep him around the squad, or whether it is more worth him either being sold to a team that can see more of a use for him, or loaned to a club that can see more of a use for him. Because, you know, you don't turn in the performances that you do at an under-21 Euros if you're not a very good and very talented player. So, you know, he's showing what he can do. It's just whether what he can do translates to City's system. In the same way that, you know, James Trafford is having a very good Euros for England under-21s, and they're through to the semis and potential meet up with Spain in the final if they both make it there. But as good as James Trafford is playing and is as a goalkeeper, is he good enough to dislodge Ederson or Ortega from the starting lineup? If he's not, then, you know, he wants to play first team football, so it probably makes sense to send him somewhere else this season.
And also Taylor Harwood-Bellis, captain in England, and seems to be doing well. And we've spoken about the defenders. He's going to be even further down the line if Gvardiol joins. So yeah, you would expect him to be leaving again in some capacity this season. I think Cole Palmer hasn't been playing much, but did he come on plays a midfielder in the final group game, a number 6? That's a more interesting, but he's clearly got the talent to play there and has done for the City youth teams in the past. So could be quite a productive tournament for City at the under-21 Euros. And you don't always say that. If it always feels like England don't fulfil their potential, but they might be doing that this year by at least getting to the semi-finals. We'll leave City there. We'll come back for a brief chat about what's going on elsewhere in the Premier League just after this break. Hello, welcome back to the Talking City podcast. We've discussed City's business, what they will, what they won't do, what they might do, and now we will talk about other deals in the Premier League. We've mentioned Arsenal. They've got Declan Rice. We assume, I don't think there's been official confirmation, but we can be safe in saying that will happen. They've also got Kai Havertz from from Chelsea. Let's just go through these teams. Do we see Arsenal being stronger than they were last year with signings like that? That's almost 200 million they've spent on 2 players there. That's a statement from them, you would think.
Yeah, very much so. It seemed a kind of statement when they went out in January and got Trossard from Brighton and tried to get Caicedo. So they've fair play to the Arsenal hierarchy for sort of backing Arteta. Arteta was always going to need kind of the time to bring in the players that he wants, and they've had success with players he's brought in. Even kind of like Jorginho, who was almost a bit of a Kovacic signing, maybe, of someone you wouldn't necessarily expect making a success of moving between teams, but made a real difference to Arsenal. So I think I'm not going to say they're going to sort of get close to 90 points again, but that has to be the aim for them, as they, sometimes success from the previous season doesn't necessarily translate to loads more points, but they would hope to at least kind of be in the race for as long, with the players and signings that they brought in on top of what they've already got.
I think it's Liverpool who are the only side who've finished second to City and then gone on and done it for second season, which is when they won in 2020 after coming second in 2019. Most of the sides that finish second then have a drop off because they've spent so much energy just trying to get close to City, and then they either haven't strengthened or they've just not got anything left, and other teams around them have strengthened. So I'd imagine that's what Arsenal are doing. I think Havertz seems expensive, but also we saw how Arsenal dropped off when they lost Jesus last season. So having another experienced body up front, I'm not saying he's going to score 20 or 30 goals, Kai Havertz, but he is clearly a very good player. If he can play more like he did at Leverkusen than Chelsea, then Arsenal will be better for it. But I can see the value in that signing as well. So it is interesting that Arsenal have seen what they did last summer and noticed that they've really got to strengthen and put the money where their mouth is themselves. Liverpool were not good last season for a variety of reasons. They've made a decent looking signing in Alexis McAllister and now Dominic Szoboszlai, who we will have to learn how to say his name. Now he's in the Premier League. He's always looked good. City have kind of been mentioned around his name in the past, but he's going to add to their sort of ranks of attacking midfielders. And I mean, surely Liverpool are another one who've got to be better next season as well.
Yeah, I think Liverpool would expect to be a lot better, and they needed to kind of rebuild their midfield, and if they can do it with these 2 incomings, then that is very, very good business. They look like Liverpool signings. They look like the sort of players you would expect. It's going to be really interesting with Liverpool to see how Trent Alexander-Arnold goes with kind of moving into midfield in the way that John Stones did towards the end of the season, and kind of got rave reviews, and then did it with England and scored a very good goal. So, will that continue? How will that affect the Liverpool defence? And how will teams try and stop that? Basically, because it felt like a lot of them had kind of worked out how to get in behind Alexander-Arnold at right back. Is there a way you can get in behind him in midfield, or is it a completely different prospect? The other aspect with Liverpool is their attack. Salah was very consistent again last year. Jota struggled with injuries. Nunez was the big one who had such a debut to remember in the Community Shield, and then did not do very much for the rest of the season, and looked like he was on the cusp of really kicking off a few times, but never did. If they can get him firing, then that makes them a completely different proposition. And if this new midfield is the key, maybe it is, then we've got the Liverpool from a few years back. But everything is kind of form and related to momentum, and things just feel like, even early in the season, you can't win the league, but you can lose it. And Liverpool's form early in the season kind of just set the wrong tone. Going back to that opening draw with Fulham 3-3 on the opening day, a game that everyone expected them to steamroller, and they were kind of lucky to draw in the end, and the defensive deficiencies were well exposed. So it is going to be interesting to watch Liverpool, because yes, they should be a lot better, but also us and everyone else is expecting them to be a lot better, so the pressure will be kind of more on them. So yeah, I think they're probably the most interesting team of the rest of the rivals.
I think with Liverpool as well, we've seen with City a lot of players take a year to adapt to the Premier League and or Gvardiol. Liverpool have a few players now, Núñez, Gakpo, Luis Diaz, who probably maybe doesn't fit the category as much as the other two, but players who have been in the Premier League now, they're used to it, they know what to expect, and they don't have the Champions League. They're in Europe, aren't they? Are they in the Europa League? So they will have some European football.
Yeah, they're in the Europa League.
But I think that those players now have no excuse. They should be better. And if they all are, and they all find that system to work, and these new signings do, I agree with you, they could be back to challenging City again. And it'll be really interesting if Arsenal keep that same standard. You would expect that Manchester United will want to build on third place, even though they weren't good for large portions of the season. They were relatively sort of consistent in just getting those sort of 2-1 wins quite a lot of the time. And Mason Mount is a similar signing, I would say, to Kovacic. He won't excite a lot of players, but a lot of fans, but he's a very good player himself, and if they can fit him in that system, then it's probably a position that United need. So depending on what United do, if they can add a striker, they'll be a force as well. And who knows what will happen with Chelsea, because no idea what players they have or have sold at the moment. They seem to have a lot of very expensive players with good records, but whether they will work under Pochettino, you don't know. Newcastle and Tottenham, are they going to be there again? Brighton, it's we say it every season, it's going to be a different task for City, and it feels more open. I think in the early stages of this window, I could come here at eve of the season and say no, it's City's to lose again, but it does feel like there's going to be a little bit more of a top 6 or 7 rather than just a top 2. Is that a fair assessment, do you reckon, of the early transfer window?
I think so. Yeah, I think we could go top 8, top 9. It's if I throw another name in, Aston Villa, very 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 good last season once Unai Emery took over, and I've made some very very good signings so far this summer. I think they're, again, with momentum, if they can have a good start, I think they could really be up and around the European places. And Brighton and Brentford will also be looking to build on their campaigns last year, and they're kind of also threats to the traditional top 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 with Newcastle. So you've got 10 teams there that all looking for European football at the very least. So it does feel, we've kind of felt for a while that the Premier League attracts the best coaches, even if it doesn't attract the best players. But now with so many good coaches, and with so much more money than the other leagues, and you get Newcastle haven't gone crazy with the money, but the fact that they're able to kind of tempt midfielders away from the Milan clubs is a sign of where they're at and where the league is at. So I think plenty of teams will spend heavily this summer, but yeah, it does feel like, especially with Brighton and Brentford lasting the distance kind of last season, and Brighton getting European football, and Villa as well, it does feel like it's kind of more open, like you say, than it has been.
It might be one of them years where the champion gets between 80 and 90, not 90 and 100, but it's potentially more impressive because there's a lot more competition in those those, as you say, that top 10. And I just think back last season, like City's hardest games were against, you'd have to say, home and away, Fulham and Brighton, really, not necessarily the other big teams. They're probably the teams who gave City the harshest opponents in the two head-to-head games. So, you know, it's that cliche, no game's easy, and Guardiola always says every season is harder than the last one because all the other teams strengthen and want to catch you. So I think it's, as much as we will keep an eye on City's business, I think it's worth keeping an eye on what everyone else is doing, because it feels like it's going to be a genuine season where any team can beat anyone else. And you also look at the bottom, you'll have teams like, I don't know, Nottingham Forest just stayed up and they ended up taking points off a lot of the big teams, but that's always a possibility as well, that, you know, those teams fighting for their lives can, you know, take a point here and there off one of the big teams, and that can help decide titles. And it's it's set up to be quite an interesting summer, and I think we'll leave it there. We'll follow that summer every step of the way, I'm sure, and see what City do with Josko, Gvardiol and anyone else, and you will hear it all first on the Manchester Evening News on our various social channels, on Twitter, if it's still running by the time we're here next week, on Facebook, on YouTube, on TikTok, everywhere you can think to find us, we will be there. So we will be back next week to talk about all things City in the transfer market. Thanks very much for joining us.